Hello, welcome to the module 5 where we are going to talk about some of the more features of Glue Data Catalog. So let's get started. Before I continue to the topic, I just want to talk again that all these modules and their labs are interconnected. Especially if you want to do the lab, you should do from lab 1 and there onward to 2, 3 and forward, because if you try to jump in the lab in between, you will not able to do it because all these labs are built on the previous labs and they are tightly interconnected with each other. So the recommendation is to watch these videos in lab in a sequence to get maximum benefit out of it. With that, let's get started. Let's talk about some of the more features of data catalog. And one of the feature I want to talk about is table schema version. So when you catalog your data, it creates a schema for your table. And to be precise, it creates a version of the schema for your table. And over a period of time, your schema might change. Some fields gets added, some fields got removed, some data type might change. And in that case, when your crawler runs again and again, it generates a new schema, and basically it does not override the previous schema, but creates a new version of the schema. So every time your schema changes, it creates a new version of the schema and makes that version as the latest schema. And by virtue of that, actually you can see the schema change history, which is very important because in a catalog, you can literally see over a period of time how my schema has changed, how many times my schema has changed, and you can go to any of the previous version and can see how the schema was at that point of time compared to today. You can also do one-to-one schema comparison. So if you want to compare two schema versions in parallel, you can do that as well. So again, it's very important from the schema change traceability or schema change lineage point of view, that you can see the schema change history for your data catalog. The next one is partitioning of the data. So when you're trying to upload your data to your data store, people like to partition their data. People can partition data based on customers, based on date, time, year, month, based on the region. And partitioning does help actually in many ways. The best help you get is when you're trying to process your data or when you're trying to query your data. Due to partitioning of your data, you don't need to scan the entire data set in order to process your information. You can only scan a specific partition of the data based on what type of query you are making. So partitioning really does help in improving the data processing as well as query performances. And when you run the crawler can automatically identify partitioning in your data. So for instance, if you have uploaded your data to S3 bucket and you have partition based on say region or date, time, something, it can automatically identify it. Similarly, if you're trying to bring data or catalog data from a table and you want to mention some kind of partition key, you can do that as well. And it can simply configure partitioning of your data. So keep this in mind that crawler can automatically partition your data, and we are going to do a lab about that as well. The last one, which is very important, is all the tables and columns you see. So when you generate your catalog, it generates tables, and then in tables will have your schema in which you mention your columns and column types. You can actually configure custom properties for those columns. So with table, you can associate custom properties. With columns, you can associate custom properties. And these custom properties can be used in some very special scenario when, for instance, you want to attach some information with your column or a table, and then you want to use that information in any kind of business logic. So if you are building some kind of custom business logic and you want to use table or column property to make certain decisions, in that case, it becomes very important. So keep this in mind, not that you use this thing every day, but in certain use cases, in certain scenario, it makes perfect sense. You can attach custom properties to tables and columns, and then those custom properties you can use into your business logic to perform any kind of custom business logic about it. Okay. So just 3 extension look very simple but very powerful. Partitioning can be identified, which is very important because then it can help improve data processing and query power. Your schemas are versioned and history of the schema change is maintained. That means if you have a data platform running for 3, 4 years, 5 years, you can see your schema change lineage or history. That helps a lot. And finally, you can also attach custom properties to your tables and the columns. So let's do some labs with these properties of catalog to see how they work. So let's jump to the AWS Console. Now here in AWS Console, I have logged into Ireland region, and I'm using Ireland region as the lab region, and if you are following me with my lab, I will recommend you to also use Ireland region so that we don't have any challenges in terms of feature or services incompatibility. I have logged into AWS Console using AWS user, one of the IAM user which has got administrative privilege. So what I'm going to do first, remember in the previous lab, we created a RDS table. So if I go to lake formation, I created an RDS database table, and in that RDS data, and then we simply cataloged that table in our data platform. So we simply catalog the table. And this table right now has got 3 columns: first name, last name, and employee number. The first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to change the schema of that table, and then I'm going to run crawler again, and I will see if my crawler will pick the schema change. We'll pick the schema change, and we'll play with the schema a bit. So for that, what I have done, we have provided you lab files. So if you can see here, we have provided you with the lab files. In the lab file, you have to use the folder 5 in this case. And folder 5, I have provided you a folder, orders folder, which I'm going to use later in the lab today. Then I have provided a SQL statements which you can use to change the schema of your table in RDS database, and then I'm using one JSON file which I'm going to use again later today. So this SQL statement look like this. If I go to my notepad and if I open the SQL statement, the SQL statement look like this. So the employees table we created in the previous module, I'm going to add one more column into it called created on, and I'll simply set that value to the current date. So that will change my schema and populate my table as well. And then I'm simply going to run my crawler and see if crawler will capture the schema change, and then we'll try to play with the schema change history and comparison. So for that, in my AWS console, I first go to my RDS management console. So I go to RDS management console. Okay, should be opening at any moment now. So yes, my RDS console opens. I have got a database instance here. So we already created this database instance in one of the previous modules lab. I go to query editor. I simply connect to this database. Okay, and my database name is Postgres. So if you have already connected, you will see this thing already configured for you. You simply provide your instance name, your username, your password, which already pre-populated for me because I have connected in the earlier module, and my database name, I connect to it. And you can see I'm connected to the database now. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to run my first SQL statement, which is going to change my table and add a column into it. So I simply run that thing. alter table employees add created on as a column there. So I run that, and that should actually create, that should change my table. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to run the second statement, which is simply going to update that column with today's date. So I simply run the second statement over here. I run it, and that should be successful. So it has updated 8 rows over here. So if I now go and query this table, I should see 4 columns in the table. So I see 4 columns in the table, which is created on is populated with today's date. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to run the crawler again. So I've already created the crawler. I simply need to run it one more time, and that crawler should pick my changes in the schema and populate into the catalog table. So I simply go to Glue. Okay, and then there I go to my crawlers. I already have this RDS crawler, so I simply select that crawler, and this crawler we configured in the previous module to crawl the database table in RDS. So I simply run it, and it will take a couple of minutes, and then it should it will check the changes in the schema of my table and should update my catalog as well. So let's wait till this crawler finish the crawling job. Okay, so you can see my crawler has finished the crawling. It is right now stopping, and it has updated one table. So it has updated this employees table schema. So if I go to table over here, I can see my schema here in lake formation, but let's see schema here. So if I click on this my Postgres public employees table again, now I can see 4th column added to my schema. And if I go to on the top and try to see my table versions, now it shows you 2 versions. So it says, so there was one version created, which was first version, which we in fact created in the previous module. And then this is the new version which we created, which simply uploaded here. So now if I want to compare the schema, so I can go and see the previous schema as well. So you can see here my previous schema, schema version 0, I have got only 3 columns over here. But if I go to schema version 1, I can see also my 4th column added. So you can always go into version history to see how your schema has evolved or changed over a period of time. I can also compare the versions. So I can simply compare the version, and since I have got only 2 versions over here, I can simply say I want to compare version 0 with version 1. And of course, you can select more versions if available here, and you can see the whole schema change here actually. So and especially you can see here in the columns configuration part, you can see here that it says that hey, in this new version, a new created on table say column was added. So you can see your schema comparison as well. So this I did in the lake formation, say in Glue, but you can also do this on the lake formation console. So this was how to see how you can update your schema using how crawler can recognize your change in the schema, and based on that it can update the catalog, and you can also see the schema history, and can also compare the schemas. Now the next thing is to learn how the partitioning works. So for partitioning, what I have done is in the module 5, if I go to module 5, in the module 5, actually I have provided an orders folder, and this orders folder has got actually year-wise folders, and in each of these years folder, actually I have got some orders. So this like you can see an orders CSV file, which I have collected based on the year. So you can see here my data is partitioned based on year. So each year has got their year of orders folder. Now what we are going to do is that we are going to simply catalog this data. We'll upload it to S3 bucket and catalog this data. then we'll run a crawler, to see if crawler can recognize the partition or not. So for that, we'll go back to AWS Console. We click on S3 Management Console. We go to S3 Management Console. And remember that we created an S3 bucket for our lab in one of the previous module, and that was Dojo Glue Lake 01. So I created Dojo Glue Lake 01, but you must have created this bucket with a different name, and then you also configured this bucket as a location in lake formation. So you might want to go to the bucket you created in one of the previous module for lake formation location. There we already created this Athena customers and scripts folder in one of the previous module. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload this orders folder into this bucket. So I simply click on the upload button over here. I want to add a folder, and it already shows me, in fact, if I show you, it already shows me in my lab 5, I have got orders folder. I simply upload the orders folder. It says, do you want to upload it? Do you trust it? Yes, I do. So now you can see here, it is simply uploading 4 CSV files from the orders year on year folders. I simply upload it. So my orders folder will be uploaded anytime now. And once my orders folder is uploaded, so my orders folder is uploaded. Now I can click on orders over here, and I can see my year on year CSV files are uploaded. So I'm all good. So now what I need to do, I need to crawl it. But there is one problem, and let me show you the problem. The problem is with my crawler permission. So if I go to IAM again, and then if I go to my roles and search for my Dojo role, and if I click on the permissions, so it has AWS Glue service role permission. If I click on that permission, try to see the JSON file. Here is the problem. The problem is it does give S3 permission, but it gives S3 permission to, for instance, if where I want to do, yeah, here we go. So the S3 permission, it gives only to the bucket starting with certain names or containing certain names. So that is a challenge for me, because then my bucket name is not starting with AWS Glue, or it does not have AWS Glue as a middle name there. So I need to, if I run this crawler again with this permission, my crawler will not have permission to look into S3 bucket. And that will, and then by virtue of that, at least crawler will not able to finish the job. So I need to give this crawler more permission, and I want to give this crawler permission on my buckets, the buckets which I'm using for my lake formation or my data lake. So for that, I have created a JSON file, a JSON policy here, and this JSON policy simply gives get, put, delete permissions and get permissions on my Dojo Glue Lake. Now again, guys, keep this in mind. This Dojo Glue Lake 01, that bucket I created in my lab. If you have created this thing into this bucket with a different name in your lab environment, then you need to replace this name by that name there. So this JSON file is already provided to you. So if I go over here, this JSON file is already provided to you. You might want to open this JSON file, replace this bucket name with some with the bucket you have created at your end. So that you have to do 2 places, one here and one there. Once you do that changes, you have to configure your permission for your Glue crawler, Dojo crawler role. So for that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to simply provide some inline policies. I'm going to simply click on this add inline policy, and I will give on the fly permission to this role. So I click on that link, it will open this create policy console. I click on JSON, and I simply copy paste this whole JSON from here to my console. Please make sure, guys, I'm simply copying paste here because my bucket name is correct over here, but in your case your bucket name might be different. So please replace this bucket name with your bucket name, otherwise it's not going to work for you. So I have provided a JSON file. I simply review the policy. I don't need to do anything and simply create the policy. And it needs a name. I will give it a name. I'll say crawler S3 permission. Let's put a dojo here so I can search later if I need to search. So now my crawler has got additional permission to look into my S3 bucket. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to configure a crawler, which is simply going to catalog my orders table, orders folder, which I just uploaded in the previous steps. So I go to Glue for that. Click on AWS Glue. Then I go to the crawlers in the left hand side. I want to add a crawler. I will call it my S3 orders crawler. So S3 orders crawler. Next. Okay, I want to look into a data source. Yeah, crawl all the folders. I'm all good. This time I'm going to use S3. So I don't need to configure my connection. So it's going to ask me, what is the path? Where is your data? So I simply click on my browse button over here, go to my Dojo Glue Lake for bucket. Now this bucket again could be different for you. Select the orders folder and that's it. So make sure you select the orders folder in your bucket which you have just created. I simply click on next. I don't need to add any additional data store. I select my role which I created for the Dojo crawler, click on next. I'm going to run it on demand. I'm not going to schedule it. Simply click on Dojo database. So in this database, I want to catalog my table for orders. Next, and then I simply finish it. So now my crawler is configured, which can crawl my orders folder into S3 bucket. Now I select this particular crawler, click on the run crawler. It's going to take a couple of minutes and then the crawler will simply catalog my orders data into my Dojo database catalog. So let's wait for that to finish. Let's wait for. Okay, so you can see my crawler has finished the job. It's right now stopping and it has added one table. If I go to tables over here, I can, and if I refresh it, okay, it shows one orders table created, which is based on my orders folder in my bucket. So let's go to lake formation. Let's see this information more in lake formation. So let's go to lake formation. And again, guys, I'm jumping to lake formation or Glue, but as long as you want to see the catalog and those, it's one of the same thing. Lake formation has got few more features where you can give permissions as well, actually. While in Glue, you can see only the schema. So click on the tables. You can see your order tables. Click on orders tables. And it will show you the partition information. So you can see here, the data has only two columns. So if I come over here to my orders data, and if I simply open this into Notepad, you can see here my data is pretty straightforward, order ID and order value. There is no third column into it. But if I go to my cataloging, you can see here it has added a partition here. So it says, okay, there is a partition and this partition is of string type. So it has recognized year as a string and it simply created a partition for that. And you can see also the partitions are mentioned. So your partition 0 is already mentioned over here. It says that your partition are spread across 2018, 19, 20, and 21, and these are their respective files and some more properties if you want to dig into. So I'll leave that to you to dig into more detail. But you can see here, crawler has automatically identified the partition in the data. And by virtue of that, when you try to process your data, you can query your data based on the partition. And in that way, you can improve your query performance. You can improve your data processing performance. Now, the last thing I want to show you is the table properties and column properties. So where can you configure that? So let's click on this particular customers table. So if you go to the customers table, and if we go all the way down, actually, in fact, you click on edit table, and you go all the way down, you can see here table properties. So here you can add more table properties. So for instance, I can say add here and simply say, for instance, is secure, like is this data secure? False. No, it is not secure. Yeah, simple, safe. Yeah. So you can add custom properties like that, which then you can use for custom logic. Similarly, you can also add custom properties for your columns. So for columns, you can simply click on schemas, edit schema. Then you can see all the columns listed for update. You can select one of the things, say customer email, for instance, okay, and say I want to edit it. And here I can add column properties. So here say, for instance, is encrypted, and say no, it's not encrypted, false. So things like that. So this kind of configuration, table and column label properties, you can configure for your catalog, and then you can use that information for any kind of custom business logic or any kind of special processing or handling you want to do with your data in the catalog. So that was the lab I wanted to do for this particular module, where you learn about schema versioning, partitioning, and also setting up properties for your columns and the table. Now the next module is we talk about the Glue job, which can be used to create ETL jobs for your data. And we also learn about Glue Studio, which is a feature which you can use to actually author or create your Glue job. So we'll learn about Glue job and Glue Studio in the next module. So see you again in the next module. Bye bye for now.